Okay, so welcome to another Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm Director of Product Marketing in VMware Cloud Services Business Unit. And today I'm joined by PrimaryIO, by Lorenzo and Sumit. So Lorenzo, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Lorenzo Salhi. I'm the founder of PrimaryIO, and I'm joined by my colleague and our Director of Engineering, Sumit Kapoor.
Go, Sumit. What's your role and responsibility in PrimaryIO?
All right. So I'm a technical director managing R&D center here in Pune, India. And
Okay.
I'll be helping with the technical slides as well as the demo today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, listen, guys, thank you very much for being on. Really excited to hear about PrimaryIO and what PrimaryIO can do for our Cloud Director solutions. So I guess without further ado, let's dive into it. Lorenzo, do you want to kind of give us a bit of background on what PrimaryIO is all about and what the company does?
Certainly. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present PrimaryIO and our technology applicable to VMware Cloud Director and Cloud Director service. PrimaryIO is a Silicon Valley company. We've been a partner of VMware from the very get-go. So our product, technology, services are very VMware focused. And the product itself is called IVAT Cloud Data Management, or short for HDM. And HDM technology is actually applicable to a variety of use cases, but for the purpose of today, we are focused into integration into VMware Cloud Director and Cloud Director service.
And specifically migration, right?
Migration to Cloud Director and Cloud Director service, a specific use case, aside of other use cases, we're fairly focused on migration capabilities, a very unique way of migration capabilities into Cloud Director and Cloud Director service.
And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit more. So yeah, let's have a look at the components. Maybe let's start with what HDM does and how it does it.
Sure, I will briefly explain the technology, and I'll pass it on to Sumit to provide the bulk of the technical information and what's built under the hood.
Okay.
In today's world, where most of the migration tools and migration solutions in the marketplace, and there are several, and then great other products as well. But enterprise workloads that are being virtualized on-prem, and they are, the intention is to migrate them to any VMware clouds. One needs to replicate an entire data set in order to have your application functional in the target cloud. Your entire data set from on-prem has to be replicated and moved first before the application is up and running. So we believe through our lenses that could be cumbersome, complicated. There are a lot of complexities associated to this, replications of tens of terabytes, if not hundreds of terabytes. And it could also be costly at some time. So time and cost is in essence, enterprise customers, they would like to be up and running fast and quick with less complexity. And that's precisely one of the issues or problems that actually PrimaryIO HDM product solves today. And we solve it by the way of having a good understanding of on-prem workloads. We were one of the early access partners, development partners of a platform called VIO at VMware. VIO stands for vSphere APIs for IO filtering. And that allows us to really look at the workloads very granular and do a massive analysis. And then there is some additional slides about the analysis. And based on those analyses, our team developed algorithms that we are in a position to look at the frequently accessed data or the hot data set on-prem. And that happens to be somewhere between as little as 5, maybe as high as 15%, but it averages about 10% of the entire data set. Now, we take that hot data set, we put it in a highly dynamic write-back cache, and we make that cache available in the target cloud as an iSCSI target. Now, as such, we can move the VM within minutes into the target cloud and have the VM or the application itself operate or function off of the cache. So as you can imagine, and instead of moving hundreds of terabytes from on-prem to cloud to the target cloud, we are in a position to only move 10% of that. And as such, agility, flexibility, quickness, having migration of application, within minutes and hours rather than days and weeks, it adds quite a bit of value. So that's at a high level of what PrimaryIO Hybrid Cloud Data Management does in the VMware environment. We're very focused on VMware on-prem workloads and VMware clouds. And with that in mind, I like to move on to the. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say it really is hybrid data. You can see why the name of the solution is it does what it says on the tin, right? And it is
Absolutely
unique in that analysis and a migration of just that hot data set. I think that's a great idea to move quickly and leave behind the stuff that can be moved at a later time or over a longer duration.
Precisely. The balance of the workloads could be hybrid if the customer decides to have a on-prem presence without really evacuating the data centers, or if they decide to completely shut down data centers and move to a target cloud. We move the balance of the data in the background. However, whether the balance of the data takes a day or a week or a month or a year, in the meantime, the application is up and running, and there is no delays in functioning, being functional in your target cloud. And with that in mind, I'm going to move on to the next slide, and my colleague Sumit will provide the rest of the technical details. Sumit.
Thanks, Lorenzo. So I'll be talking about the core technology. Lorenzo has already covered it at high level, so I'll be getting into details on how our product is deployed, and then basically how does it analyze the environment, and then flex the virtual machines onto the cloud and work in a hybrid decoupled port. So we basically provide a soft appliance which would get deployed on a VMware environment on the source or the premise side. This soft appliance provides interfaces to inject a PrimaryIO HTM plugin within the vCenter. After that is done, the management, monitoring, as well as migrations of virtual machine can be done through that interface itself. We also provide interfaces to configure the on-prem environment and add a cloud target. So when I say configuring the on-premise environment, it basically is inserting a IO filter, which is basically a VMware certified pass-through filter within the hypervisor. And this is the IO filter which sits between the virtual machines or the applications running within the virtual machines and the VMDKs. We also deploy a storage gateway on the source or premise environment. And this is the gateway between the VMDKs on premise and the WAN interconnect.
Right.
Using the interfaces on the plugin, the customer can add the cloud endpoint. At that point, we have the storage gateway that is deployed. Again, the storage gateway is deployed on the WAN interconnect and provides the gateway to the HTM cache, which is also deployed on the cloud target. The customer can choose where to deploy, and all our services that we have created are basically containerized. So this is what helps us to manage HA, scale up, scale down in case the requirements do come. With this, basically, we have got the full deployment in place. And with the IO filter on the premise side, we are able to analyze the working set requirement for that application. We are also able to analyze the performance requirement for that application. And these are the things that I'll talk about in the upcoming slides. So with this information in mind, we know what is the cache requirement for that particular virtual machine and what would be the phase transition in terms of workload when the virtual machine or the application starts running on the cloud. With that, we are able to decouple the compute from the data. We just migrate the compute onto the cloud. The compute brought up onto the cloud running over the HTM cache. Any changes that the application is doing on the cache is first written on the cloud is first written onto the HTM cache. And over the time, it is basically synced back on premise as well. So this is a setting or a policy that customer can set based on the RTRP that they want. And this information is synced back on premise to keep consistent copy in case there is a huge WAN disconnect. In the meantime, the application continues to run from the HDM cache. Any request that it requires, we have intelligent caching implemented. We understand different policies like read ahead. We have done predictive modeling to understand what offsets would be required for the applications, and we pre-fetch this information before the application actually requires access to those. Also, we have everything encrypted and compressed. So any data that is moving out of premise to cloud and is sitting within the HDM cache or is being managed by HDM is basically encrypted and compressed. And we do dedupe the data when we are transferring it across the WAN between these two sites.
So Sumit, is the HDM cache and the policies that you've created, are they particularly focused on application types like databases, web servers, and different types of vendor applications, or are they more sort of generic around the actual data?
It's actually quite generic. So we provide recommendations based on the analysis that we done. So we have policies which would define that if the cache size set is this much percentage of the data set or is equal to this particular size, then these are the good candidates of applications that can be migrated using our product or can be decoupled in this way. And so it could be databases, it could be web tier applications, it could be analytical applications as well, in which most of the writes are first done and then analysis are happening. So writes would basically be written onto the HDM cache. Application can read it, service it, write the information, and we'll keep on syncing it back on premise as well.
Okay, cool.
Right, so as I promised, this is some of the views that have been captured from our interface. So this is what is talking about or giving the recommendations or view of the IO analysis that we do on the premise end. So we have inserted and pass-through IO filter, which basically understands or collects information about the metadata for the offset access or the data access.
Mm-hmm.
What it means is we are capture the offset. We are able to understand whether it is a read or a write access. We are able to understand the block size. And with that, we do some summarization to understand the throughput and IOPS that the application is seeing. So this information is something that is summarized first in the ESXi or hypervisor and then pushed on to our appliances to have a bigger analysis done across larger time scales, like say an hour to say last 14 days. With that analysis in mind, we provide recommendations to the working set, which is required for the application to run. So working set is derived from the MRC calculation that is proprietary to us. And this is something that we have implemented in such a way that you can basically analyze thousands of virtual machines with a minimal footprint within the ESXi itself. Along with that, we understand the throughput requirement, the performance requirement, and this is what is required when you're moving the applications to a different data center. So you would need to, provision the storage in such a way that the application runs as per the requirement. The other thing that we do is once we have even flexed the virtual machine, it is running on the cloud, we keep on monitoring it. We keep on seeing how the cache is being utilized, how the network is being utilized. And based on the monitoring, we do change the characteristics of the cache associated with that application to give a consistent performance even in the decoupled mode.
And just to point out that, so I think it's probably time to talk about a little bit. I mean, this is great stuff, and it's interesting to see how this differentiates your solution a lot. But what sort of use cases would this support in terms of the actual caching itself? It's only going to be relevant for kind of warm migration, is that right?
That is right. It is relevant for migration, but the analysis also is relevant even if you're doing other migrations as well, if you're doing hot, cold migration. Because the performance characteristics which is required for that application, this is something that you would need to incorporate when you're planning the cloud environment as well. You would need
That's
to,
true. Yeah.
apply correct storage policies, make sure that the data centers or the tiering that you have done is basically applicable to what on-premise already has
Got
or
it. Okay.
application needs. Right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
All right.
And
So,
here is the money slide, right? This is the bit we're here to learn about. This is the VCD and Cloud Director service integration.
right. So this is a unique offering. This is something that we have built based on customer requirements that have come up. So let me give a little bit context about VCD environment. So in VCD, you would have vCenters which are acting as resources. On top of VCDs, you can create provider virtual data centers. And on these provider virtual data centers, you can create organization data centers. And these organization virtual data centers is what you would be sharing with your customer as a tenant portal. So till the provider side, it is managed by a system admin, while the customer is required to interact to manage their virtual machines through the tenant portal within the organization virtual data center.
Mm-hmm.
Integration has been done with the organization virtual data center level. We do not require any access to the provider VDC or any integration or any integration on the vCenter itself. We basically have to have an interconnect between the on-prem environment and the edge gateway for that particular VDC. It can be an IPsec kernel, or it could be an L2 VPN or L2 extension that the customer can configure. Once this is configured using the same interfaces that I talked about, customer would be able to deploy our product on premise and add the organization VDC as the cloud endpoint. With that done, this environment is all ready for migrating virtual machines from your environment into the VDC directly. Now, over here, we are using the vCloud Director or the Cloud Director APIs, and this is what helps us to manage the network as well as virtual machine within the organization VDC level itself. So in the we have the same components. We have got storage gateways on both the ends. Calling out sync daemon because this is a technology that we have developed to transfer the data from on-prem to cloud. And this it has been optimized to handle network disconnects. So in case, for example, there is a transfer which is going on and you see a transient error or an error in the WAN connection, then you don't need to restart the transfer. We would basically pause the transfer at that point and then resume the transfer from there on. So this basically reduces the time that a customer would need to migrate the virtual machine at the cloud environment as well.
And Sumit, what are you actually deploying in the customer org? Is the storage gateway and a sync daemon, are they part of the appliance that needs to go in the customer org, or is there anything at all in the customer org?
So in customer org, we deploy an appliance. So this is basically a virtual machine which contains our services. So sync daemon, what I'm calling out, is one of the services which would be running within that appliance. And this is something which I would talk about, when we get into the demo as well. So you can see the actual appliances on both the ends and how the data is transferred.
And then the new plugin that you have for VCD is able to then the customer can access this and do have exactly the same controls as he would in the vCenter plugin on his premise. Is that right?
So our plugin is on the source VMware environment itself. So from the source environment, we provide the mechanism to manage and migrate virtual machines. So that is what the customer would be using. Right?
Okay, all right.
In addition to that, real quick, HDM is a unified computing platform or unified migration platform, I should say, across dedicated and shared environment. And it comes with multiple different migration versions, such as cold, warm, hot. Some available immediately today, and others are in the pipeline, starting to be released. At the end of February, and then subsequently, 60 to 90 days after.
Right. So.
Yeah,
So
just
from
a
a
bit on the
commercial
commercials.
Yeah, in order to make it simple and easy, this product is not related to any size of the storage or capacity or it's just pure per VM basis. It's licensed per VM. Each VM requires one HDM license. Um, Today, the standard license fees are somewhere between $19 to $29 per VM per month. But there is in additional terms and conditions that we would like to discuss directly with customers, and obviously, being a very close partner of VMware and the VCPP platform and VCPP partners, there's additional license discount, applicable, for higher volumes and so on. And happy to discuss this further. In the interest of time, I'll pass it on to Sumit to start a demo.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right. So I'll talk about the demo environment. So for the demo, we have our data center, which is in Fremont. We have also created a VCD environment on which we have created a VDC. So the version that I'm using for the demo is 10.2, which is what you would see in a CVS environment as well. We have already installed our product. We have basically configured the connection between these two environments as well. So today I'll be taking you through the interfaces by which you can integrate the cloud endpoint and then basically migrate the virtual machines from premise to the organization VDC. So over here, we are talking about the steps that are required to integrate the cloud endpoint, and then how do we migrate the virtual machines onto the cloud. So for this demo, I'll be talking about cold migration. That is what we are currently supporting in 2.1 and 2.2, which, as Lorenzo pointed out, coming February, will also support bomb migration. So using the interfaces.
Sorry, Sumit, just to be clear. So 2.1 is GA now, and that supports cold migration to Cloud Director and Cloud Director service environments.
That's right.
HDM 2.2 is coming out very soon. It's January now, so it'll be out February 2021. And that will support warm migrations to both endpoints as well.
Right.
Fantastic.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Good.
All right. So with the interfaces, Lorenzo, if you can. Seems like the demo environment. Yeah, so we have provided interfaces where customer would be able to add cloud. They would have to choose the cloud target type, and then using the FKTN, the organization name, as well as the organization admin credentials, they would be able to add the organization VDC as the cloud target. After that, the deployment is all through the workflows and managed by HDM itself. Once the product has been deployed, customer can select one or multiple virtual machines to migrate it onto the organization VDC end. And for this, we had to devise a different mechanism. As you would know, we do not have a view of VMDKs or data store. So we are using a micro VM service, which we inject within the virtual machine on the VDC end. So basically on the premise using the storage gateway, we would read the data using VDK APIs, which are basically VMware aware. We would encrypt, compress, and send it to the SYNC or the storage gateway at the cloud endpoint, which would then transfer this data onto the micro VM services injected within the virtual machine. With that service, we would be writing the data directly onto the VMDK. And once the data has been transferred, we would remove our service and get the virtual machine up and running on the VDC end itself.
Are you doing some sort of, so is this all happening on the vCenter and then doing a VCD auto import and creating it to a VApp, or how is that actual process working?
That is right. So basically, see, there are a lot of properties which gets captured in the which are associated with the virtual machines. For example, what is the hardware version? Then what is the compute and CPU that has been configured on that virtual machine, whether it's an EFI boot, whether it's a BIOS-based boot, what are the different hardware controllers, network controllers. So all this information is something which is present on the virtual machine on source. And this is what we need to capture when we are migrating onto the organization VDC itself. Can give you an example. If the hardware version change, then it can happen that virtual machine will not boot up. And once the hardware version have changed, you cannot go back to that hardware version on the VCD side, and that can be a problem. And migration would fail. And similarly, if you have EFI and you're migrating it without the proper flags, you will see the virtual machine will not come up on the VDC end. So these are the things that for which we basically capture the template, the OVF, and we move the template onto the VDC. And this is just the template containing the configuration and not the data. So this is something that we configure at a later point, and then using a micro-VM service, we just move the data from on-prem to cloud. And once it is done, then basically we remove our service, and that VM with the same configuration which you had on the source is now running on the VDC side.
Okay, got it.
Right. So moving on to demo. Let's start sharing my screen. Yes.
Okay.
Right. So this is my on-prem environment in which you can see this is the HDM plugin, which is already configured within my on-prem vCenter. I've already added a cloud endpoint, which is vCloud Director, and we have used the organization name. I've used the organization admin credentials to basically configure the cloud director. And this is how the integration, and basically I've deployed the appliances on the cloud director end as well.
Right.
So I'll talk about the on-prem environment. This is a small environment to keep things less confusing. So this is the appliance which a customer would deploy on their premise environment or source environment. And this is what is basically providing them the interface to inject the plugin. Configuring on-premise would deploy one appliance on the premise side. So we call it on-prem ESXi manager, and this is the storage gateway which contains our services which can read from VMDKs. And this is basically connected to the WAN-facing network and will be used for transferring the data from the prem environment to the cloud environment.
Sumit, do you think this is something that service providers would run, as a managed service, or as a could you see this being a self-service option?
Yeah, so this is something which is a self-service option as well. Customer can by themselves take up this tool, and then deploy the product and then work on it, because whatever they need, it's basically credentials for their on-prem environment and credentials of their VDC environment. With that, it is, so this is something that can be done. Even the provider, if they have access to the on-prem environment, they can install our product and do the migration for the customer themselves as well.
Right. Okay.
Moving on to the cloud environment.
And just to confirm, then the networking, the VPN piece would be something that's done manually by the customer or by the service provider. It's an extra step that needs to be done. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So an interconnect will be established between the on-prem and the cloud environment. Right. So it is basically a standard IPsec VPN that customer can configure between the edge gateway and the premise environment. So with that, they would need to create a routed network, which would be configured to the VApp where our product is being deployed. For example, over here, I have created a VApp known as DHDM. On this HDM or the virtual VApp, I've configured our appliances. Over here, we call it HDM Cloud Cache. And this is the storage gateway, which is connected to the routed network on the VDC side and is able to talk to the micro VM services that we would be using for migration. So getting on to the network configuration for this VApp, we have created a WAN network and an internal network. WAN network is the routed network, which is the WAN facing network, and the internal network is an optional network, and this is something that customer can configure and is used for data transfer between our appliance and the micro VM services. Moving on to the premise environment, I'll show you the interfaces by which you can migrate the virtual machine. So there are two ways. One is you can click on cluster. You can basically go through the migrate interface, or you can click on a single virtual machine and go through the HDM interface to migrate this VM. Both the interfaces at cluster and virtual machine level are the same, and they will take you through the same wizard. The only difference is if you're going through a cluster the migration interface, you would be able to select multiple virtual machines when you're migrating it onto the cloud.
Is this something that could be run via the API as well?
Yes, this is something which is very much integrated with, and we do provide public APIs and SDK as well, which customer can use to write scripts and migrate virtual machines.
Okay.
Right. So migration type currently, as I said, for 2.1, which is G8, we are supporting gold migration, but coming soon, you will see one migration as well. Moving ahead, we'll select the cloud endpoint. So this over here, you're seeing everything is unlimited because the thing how the VDC is configured is pay as you go. So basically, you'll be charged only for what.
I was going to ask you that. So if there's existing quotas on there and allocations, are they going to, will the imports work? They would, even if they exceed the allocations?
Not exceed the allocation. We would show them a warning that you're exceeding the allocation, and then basically customers would have to, make sure that there is enough resources available for the migration to proceed.
Okay. But if you're sorry, one more thing. If you're doing that hot data set, then that's a very small amount of the allocation that's going to be used. Is that correct?
True. That is correct. So it would be, so we basically allocate a cache, and it would be part of the cache which would be in use. So during the deployment, basically you would be creating that cache environment.
And I believe that can make a try before you buy type use case.
Yes, exactly. So that is, you can basically decouple and get the VM up and running within minutes on the cloud endpoint. You can see if everything is working, the configuration is correct, the networking that you have done is correct. Once you are comfortable, you can start the data transfer, or well, you can come back onto your premise environment and adjust or tweak a few things before you are comfortable with the cloud endpoint.
One can test the cloud seamlessly before fully committed to move tens of terabytes of data into the cloud.
And can it provide a control of that and say, well, I'll just give you access to do a try before you buy type service, and then allow you to do the full migration later, or is that something that's in the customer workflow only?
It's in the customer workflow. So, right.
Okay.
Okay, so this is an interface from where a customer can select multiple virtual machines or a single virtual machine. In this case, we have a special flag known as application dependency. So if there are applications which are dependent on or virtual machines which are dependent on other VMs, you can so tag, and those are the virtual machines that would show in this particular list as well. This interface also lets you change the CPU that would get configured onto the cloud VM once it is migrated, and you can even change the cloud memory as well.
Right.
For this demo, going ahead with the default. The next thing is basically select the target endpoint. You can select a VApp onto which you would want to migrate this virtual machine. So in general practices, you would want to migrate it into say a bubble VApp or a test VApp and see if things are working fine before moving on to the production. So, or you can directly move on to the production and choose the storage profile that you would want when you're migrating this virtual machine.
Sure.
The next important thing is basically you can map your on-prem environment to pre-provisioned networks that you would have created on your VDC environment. So these would be your say application VLANs on source and application VLANs on the VDC environment that would be created. So you can map these things, and based on the mapping as a post-configuration process, we would make sure that the virtual machine is connected to that particular network.
Mm-hmm.
Going through the summary and just submitting the migrate request. So this may take a few minutes as we do certain pre-checks to make sure resources are available and to make sure the virtual machine is not already existing on that environment. Once this is done, it will submit the request.
Sure, and the decompression, I saw in the slides, you got the encryption, compression,
Right.
deduplication, that's all taken care by your appliance?
Yes, it's all taken care by our appliance. So one thing that we do is we also integrate with the on-premise. If a customer has a key manager within their VMware environment, we can integrate with their key manager, and we can basically use it for creating keys that would be used for encrypting the data across the WAN. And we basically create one key per VMDK. So each key is different for VMDK, right?
So you'd hang on, so you'd then, so you'd create a key on the customer side.
Yes.
And then that key would have to be somehow used on the service provider side to decrypt that data as well, right?
That is right. So this is something that we keep in the memory. This is not written anywhere else. And once the key is used, we can we discard it, and we also provide mechanism by which customer would be able to rotate the key if they want those kinds of policies.
Okay, cool. Yeah, nice.
Right. So migration. So we can see migration has started. We are doing a bunch of operations on the premise side. It's basically configuring a getting the template out of that particular virtual machine, which would, as I said, keep the source configuration as it is when it is migrated onto the cloud endpoint. So this is the wizard, which can be used for monitoring the data transfer. Well, the workflow itself is quite asynchronous, so you have to sit over here to observe everything. You can basically check the migration progress as well through the recent through the task that gets created for that particular virtual machine. And at cluster level, we do provide interfaces by which you would be able to monitor the progress there as well.
Okay. And this is obviously when you're talking about Cloud Director service, you're talking about 10.2 support and NSXT. So I guess this is really oblivious to the NSX version. The networking's slightly out of the scope, really, isn't it? Yeah.
True. So we support anything from 9.7 to 10.2. And we support NSXV-based VCD environments and NSXT-based VCD environments as well. As you rightly pointed out, we need the edge gateway to allow a VPN connection. Even if edge gateway does not allow VPN connection, we have done use cases where we have used OpenVPN to configure a tunnel between the routed network and the on-prem environment, and using that we can migrate virtual machines as well.
Sure.
Right. So this is the data transfer that has started. This would take somewhere around 10 to 12 minutes for migration to complete. But I can show you a virtual machine that we had migrated earlier. Okay, so you can see that this is the VM that has been created. So this is just a template where we would be inserting our micro VM services and powering it on. Once it powers on, that is when the data transfer would start. And it will stay in power on mode until the data transfer completes. Once that is done, we will remove our services and power off this virtual machine, configuring it with the CPU memory that was configured during the migration process and connecting it to the correct network.
And Sumit, if you're running multiple jobs, are they going to run synchronously, or are they going to run, as one batch?
So we basically currently support batching 10 migrations at a time. So if you can queue like hundreds of migrations, we would be servicing 10 VMs and then the next set of 10 VMs, or well, 10 VMs and one virtual machine. If it is fully migrated, we'll pick up the other set and keep on doing so.
So it's concurrent for blocks of 10. Okay.
Yes. Concurrency is at 10.
Okay.
Right. So again, our cold migration is operating system agnostic. It supports hardware version from 4 to whatever the virtual data center supports. Currently, I believe it's 14. And we also support different, EFI-based, BIOS-based. We support all the controllers which are present on the premise side for both networks as well as for the disks.
So this is a great way of getting some slightly legacy environments into the cloud provider then. Yeah.
True. So this is a Windows VM that I had migrated earlier. So let me, bring it up and show you that yes, migration does work, and operating system would be running on your VDC environment.
There you go. That's all you need to see for a Windows machine. It's the login screen. You know it's working.
Yes. Right.
Okay, great. So this is a really, I think, a very interesting solution, particularly when the warm migration capability comes along, just to be able to, do that analysis. Lots of service providers, hopefully they do professional service engagements in any case and find out about what's going on the customer site. But, with this solution, actually, you don't necessarily need to do that. You could let the analyzer run, feed itself the information it needs. So you could almost do a cheaper migration for the customer without an in-depth professional services engagement.
Correct. So one of the ideas is as such that the professional services within the partner providers could be utilized for a bunch of other projects.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
One of the reasons.
It's really making the migration as simple as possible, so you can focus on the value of transformation, and application development.
Correct. And the idea was to make sure that we've got a product out in the hands of some customers with cold migration, and subsequently immediately bring in the warm migration. So we're literally days away from offering the warm migration, which obviously has most of the features and benefits to our partners.
Awesome. So this runs in the Cloud Director service world. This will be running in the customer org, in the production side of it rather than the management side of it.
Yes, that is right.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, Sumit, is there anything else to look at in the demo here?
I think it is going to take some time to transfer the data, and the VMs can be brought up. But this is the main flow. This is how the cold migration happens, and that I explained how we do the migration and how we write the data onto the PTC endpoint. So that is what is currently going on, and then the post configuration that happens once data is transferred. So I can basically stop sharing this, and Lorenzo can talk about the slide. Or if there are any questions, those we can take it from here.
I think you've covered it, man. I from my perspective, I wanted to just talk through, who PrimaryIO are. I think we've covered that, and the type of capabilities that are supported today and what's coming tomorrow, the value proposition, and the use cases that fall out of this. So I think this is a very exciting solution, gentlemen. I'm very much looking forward to seeing HDM 2.2 coming out. But obviously having a migration mechanism with 2.1 is great, and people should start looking at this if they're interested in this type of service straight away. I mean, it's really convenient, and by looks of things, fairly simple to set up. I wouldn't say that would take more than a couple of hours to get that up and running. And yeah, once you've done the VPN and got the connectivity in, that's probably the hardest part. It usually is. You're up and ready to go. Lorenzo, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just wanted to maybe just share the final slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We're excited to connect with partners out there and provide the product and services, whatever's needed. I'm trying to. My apologies. Just this.
There we go.
Yeah. So there are a couple of emails, information that I wanted to kind of share with folks out there. More than happy to support either an email to sales@PrimaryIO or support at PrimaryIO, primaryio.com. Please look us up and allow us to provide you with this unique solution, and would love to continue supporting the VMware partners.
And also, if partners out there are after more information, there is information on the VCD product page now for PrimaryIO, and also our blog site. We have the HDM 2.1 functionality, and when 2.2 comes out, we'll post another blog as well about that. So keeping everyone current with where we're at in the release train. Guys, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate you spending the time to run through the solution. Sumit, thank you so much for setting up the lab and showing us how this all works. And I look forward to a future of many migrations with PrimaryIO.